Critical thinking is dead, but not in the way that you expect it to be.
You are not thinking critically if you're always comfortable.
You know, the irony of Gen Z is that we literally live in an age where we have more access to information than any previous generation ever has. And yet most of us aren't actually taught the critical thinking skills required to evaluate all of the content we are constantly consuming.
I'm genuinely terrified for this next generation of children. The entitlement and genuine stupidity, and I'm sorry to call kids stupid, but like, we are not smart anymore at all, is so scary.
Critical thinking is dead. Back then, critical thinking was taken in the context of analyze the play, deconstruct the theme, and write me 800 words by Monday morning. But somewhere along the way, we forgot that critical thinking, but more importantly, our ability to think for ourselves and form our own views, wasn't supposed to stay trapped in an essay. It seems that over the past decade, critical thinking has slowly become a dying art. And I call it an art and not a skill because it's more than just a checkbox on a resume. It's the quiet, messy process of forming your own perspective and noticing when things don't add up. It's asking the so what before you swallow a headline, and it's being able to be willing to change your mind when the facts don't match your feelings. In a society where we've been conditioned to follow the masses, our ability as conscious human beings to form our own perspectives and form our own views is frankly dying. There was a novel published in 1932 by a famous English author, Aldous Huxley, called Brave New World. It conceptualizes a society where people never have to sit with discomfort, boredom, or unanswered questions because they're numbed on demand with entertainment, pleasure, and a drug called soma whenever they need. Nobody has to think deeply or even think for themselves because the system keeps them constantly stimulated and superficially satisfied. The introduction of the internet and digital media has quietly turned us into individuals who react first and think later. Short-form social media platforms have encouraged us to spend any free time we have to doom scroll and consume content at such a rapid pace. Nothing feels real anymore. These platforms have drugged our dopamine receptors and our attention spans in the exact same way Soma has drugged the citizens of Brave New World. And you know what? I'm guilty of it as well. Just like you and me, there will be times where I look up from my phone and realize I've just burned 2 hours on TikTok, and other times YouTube autoplay will drag me from one video to the next until it's suddenly 3 AM. The thing is, it's not just a problem that's unique to me. It's become the norm now, and we've quietly slipped into a digital era of social unconsciousness. This is especially true for younger generations, where there isn't quite a shift, but rather the starting point for them. For them, constant stimulation is a lifestyle they've adopted at a young age. And the thing is, it isn't their fault. As a society, we've become constantly bombarded with the sheer amount of availability and accessibility of digital media that overconsumption has become the norm. When I was a kid, iPads and digital devices were a novel thing, and not everyone had access to them. When I went to the barber's, I had to sit and wait patiently for my haircut, even if it took a healthy amount of time. Nowadays, when I go out to eat, all I see are parents trying to pacify their children with an iPad or digital device. While it might seem trivial to some, over time, it sends a subtle message towards our cognitive ability. It teaches our children that waiting is optional, and if you want something, you should get it now. This unrealistic expectation slowly bleeds into everything as we grow up. If a video doesn't grab your attention in 3 seconds, you swipe. If a website takes more than a couple of seconds to load, you close it. If learning something takes more than one quick explanation, it feels too hard. The internet has completely rewired how we access and consume information. And as a generation, we now thrive on the notion of, I want it and I want it now. Virtually anything you want to know, watch, listen to, argue about, or obsess over is a few taps away. For some, it sounds empowering. And in some ways, it is. We have access to more information and data than ever before. But we do have to ask ourselves, what are we really giving up for it? One of the scariest things about our generation is that people don't walk around feeling uninformed. They actually feel over-informed and exhausted by the plethora of information that is thrown to us every day. Whenever there's an important news update or latest trend, we feel like we know what's going on because we've seen 5 different clips on the issue and 3 hot takes. And in our mind, that's more than enough to know what's really going on. However, it's important to understand that as human beings, we'll naturally mistake familiarity for understanding. I mean, just take a look at what's happening with deepfakes. In 2022, a video surfaced of Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky apparently telling his troops to lay down their arms and to surrender. Not surprisingly, it was fake. Generated and distributed online, and even slipped briefly into a Ukrainian TV station's website before it was pulled off. But not before plenty of people had watched it, reacted to it, and shared it. This is the new era of misinformation that is sold to us. It doesn't arrive looking like a conspiracy pamphlet. It arrives in the same crisp, vertical format as every other piece of content on your For You page. In parallel, our sharing habits have become almost completely detached to what we're actually reading. A recent study estimated around 80 billion instances of sharing news stories without clicking over just a few years. The authors described it bluntly as news virality is being driven by superficial processing of headlines rather than careful deep thinking and engagement with the actual content. And it's no surprise, right? When you see a shocking headline or a shocking story, it drives an emotional reaction out of us, wanting us to react immediately without considering the context, the content, or the legitimacy of the story. And so you end up in a bizarre situation where people are so saturated with content and will spend hours of their day glued onto their feeds, but not actually get any real substance out of it. The illusion of knowledge is extremely powerful. And while sometimes we feel like we know what's going on, in reality, we've seen a carefully curated set of emotional highlights that have been designed by the algorithm to seize our attention and to keep us scrolling. And so it's no surprise that our ability to critically think starts to waver at the exact moment we let our unconscious consumption habits shape our perspectives. To understand why this keeps happening, we have to zoom out for a second and really look at the incentives. None of the major platforms, TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, X, exist to make you any wiser. They exist to sell your attention. And the algorithms are designed to answer one question: what will keep this person clicking, scrolling, and swiping for as long as possible? Once you frame it that way, the layers start to stack together and everything makes a little bit more sense. Over the last few years, several studies have converged on the same uncomfortable truth. Negative, emotionally charged content spreads faster than neutral or positive content. Another study by researchers at Northwestern's Kellogg School found that across more than 1 million posts, they found that false or misleading content tends to provoke more moral outrage than accurate news. And that outrage, in turn, makes people much more likely to share posts impulsively, often without reading the linked article at all. Put those two findings together for a second and you get a very simple formula. If content is made to specifically drive an emotional reaction out of you, it's more likely to be boosted by the algorithm. And it's not just me and you. Mainstream media has caught up with this trend as well, and I've already made a video on this, but in 2024, an Oxford University press picked brainrot as its word of the year, defining it as a perceived loss of intelligence or critical thinking caused by overconsumption of trivial, unchallenging content. Rage bait and brainrot content. This is exactly what social media platforms are rewarding. And the thing is, creators notice this as well. They see which thumbnails, titles, and tones the algorithm likes, and they learn that if they simplify complex issues into trivial TikToks, rage bait, and brainrot content that strips away nuance, they're more likely to get more views. There's a term for this, and it's called weaponized simplicity. And while it may not necessarily be a bad thing, we can't act surprised when people start to lose their tolerance for complexity. At the end of the day, social media algorithms are designed to keep you scrolling, not to keep you thinking. The growth in short-form video platforms did more than change how we consume content. It is changing what our brains expect from reality. For a lot of people, the day now begins and ends with the same ritual. Lie down, open a short video application and start flicking. TikTok, Reels, Shorts, comedy, horror, politics, drama. Each clip a tiny shot of novelty in the doom scroll. While it may seem insignificant for us, neuroscientists are starting to map out how doom scrolling is starting to affect your brain chemistry over a long period of time. A recent neuroimaging study of people with heavy short video use showed altered brain activity in regions linked to reward and risk. They were less sensitive to losses and made more impulsive decisions in lab tasks. A pattern the authors note is similar in some ways to profiles seen in gambling or substance addictions. When you combine our culture of the overconsumption of content alongside our increasing willingness to doom scroll and brain rot, we start to lose the ability to think for ourselves. The interesting thing is, both authors and philosophers have been noticing this trend over a century ago. In George Orwell's 1984, thought crime is literally illegal. Citizens have been raised to conform, and language is shrunk into quote-unquote newspeak, so certain ideas can't even be formed clearly in your head. The telescreen never turns off, the slogans never stop, and the constant noise slowly erodes your ability to trust your own judgment. Now, our society isn't quite as dystopian as 1984 just yet, but we're slowly starting to see soft versions of the key themes slowly bleed into how we interact with digital media. For us, we have algorithms quietly deciding what we see and what we don't see. Instead of one big brother on the wall, we carry a dozen little telescreens in our pockets and voluntarily feed them our data. You can already see a harsher, more extreme version of this start to play out in Chinese society. The quote-unquote Great Firewall blocks entire platforms and topics such as YouTube and Facebook, removes sensitive posts from appearing, has real name registration, dense networks of cameras and facial recognition, and social credit style systems to nudge people to behave. When what you see is filtered and what you can say is controlled, deep, honest thinking, but more importantly, our ability to think for ourselves, starts to feel unsafe. Layer on top of this our addiction with doom scrolling, and the picture becomes even darker than it already is. Studies of doom scrolling during COVID found that repeated scrolling throughout negative news stories on phones, especially late at night, was associated with more anxiety, stress, and pessimism about the future, driven by a mix of negativity bias, FOMO, and information overload. Critical thinking, by contrast, requires the exact opposite conditions. It needs time, working memory, and a bit of calm and patience. It needs you to sit with unanswered questions and resist the urge to chase the next dopamine hit. It needs you to be able to read more than a paragraph without your hand twitching towards your phone to see if there's a new notification waiting. Most importantly, critical thinking requires a level of patience, an ability to perceive, and an ability to judge rationally without bias. Traits that are slowly dying within our society. For a lot of us, it's easier to take a more simple approach and say, people nowadays are just lazier than before. And it's a comforting story because it makes the problem feel simple and immaterial. But when you dig a little deeper, there's a little bit more nuance to the story. Historically, every major shift in media has triggered a direction towards the loss of independent free thought. In the 19th century, Henry David Thoreau was already using the phrase brain rot to complain that people preferred low-effort entertainment to serious thought. Later, it was cheap novels, then radio, then television, and now the same fear has simply migrated to phones. If you look at some of the research, the picture is mixed rather than fully catastrophic. Some international assessments and national reports show worrying dips in reading comprehension and problem solving in certain countries. A large study from Sweden and the US shows concerns that heavy social media use in 10 to 14-year-olds is associated with more attention problems. On the other hand, there is also a strand of work that shows when digital tools are used deliberately in structured classroom projects, collaborative online discussions, or media literacy activities, they can actually enhance critical thinking. Analysis of computer-supported collaborative learning environments report modest but real improvements in students' critical thinking skills, and studies in higher education have found that carefully designed social media assignments can actually help students practice evaluating sources, forming arguments, and challenging assumptions. To contextualize the situation, we have to understand that younger generations have grown up with more data and more digital media than any other generation before them. They follow wars, climate science, economic trends, and elections through live feeds and citizen journalism, not just the evening news. Studies show that a large share of under 30s are actively using social media platforms over traditional media to keep up with politics, current events, and not just merely for entertainment. And to add onto all of this, we also have to consider how social media starts to fuse identity with opinion. And I'll do my best to explain what that means. When your perspectives are tied to an internet personality or an influencer, changing your mind may feel uncomfortable. You aren't just changing your mind or updating a belief. You're challenging the status quo, and you're potentially losing a sense of agency within your own mind. In that environment, doubling down is rewarded, curiosity is punished, and the cost of intellectual honesty rises. So no, I don't think it's as simple as to say critical thinking is slowly dying out because everyone has slowly lost 20 IQ points, right? It's under pressure from a culture and society where speed, consumption, and certainty are rewarded, whereas on the other hand, patience, thought, and perspective are slowly bleeding out. At the end of the day, we're just a product of the system. If the problem is built into the environment we live in, it's easy for us to feel helpless. You can't rewrite TikTok's algorithm from your bedroom, you can't ban deepfakes, and you're not going to convince every content creator to sacrifice views for nuance. But there is still a quiet rebellion that is available. Forcing yourself to consciously form your own perspectives and not being scared to share them. A Kellogg study on outrage and misinformation found that we are most likely to share false content when we feel morally provoked, and that outrage nudges us to hit share without reading, even when we are otherwise pretty good at spotting misleading claims. Take a step back sometimes and think if it makes sense to you. Form your own perspective, have your own thoughts, and really take a second to think deeply about the content before you consume it. And yes, it will feel harder than it should, but when you stop to think, you're doing something the algorithm never asked you to do. You're interrupting the reflex. You're choosing curiosity over autopilot. And slowly, decision by decision, you start replacing borrowed opinions with thoughts that are genuinely your own. In an overconsumption economy, your attention is the only thing that counts. Every time you refuse to doom scroll one more screen, every time you skip an obvious piece of rage bait, and every time you choose substance over brain rot, you are quietly voting in favor of your own consciousness. At the end of the day, we are all our own unique beings with our own unique sense of consciousness and our own unique sense of agency. We don't live in 1984. We don't live in Brave New World, but we do live in a world where we're lucky to still have the autonomy to decide our own perspectives, or just be another predictable data point in someone's algorithm. Food for thought. I'll see you in the next episode. If you made it this far into the video, firstly, thank you. A lot of effort is put into the research, filming, ideation, and production of these videos, so it would mean the absolute world to me if you could subscribe, but more importantly, leave a comment to share your thoughts. It's absolutely free. It's an amazing way for you to leave your feedback and a way for me to connect with my community. And yes, I will be doing my best to respond to every comment. Thank you.